Alright, so I was gonna make a video on the Pelican situation because I feel like it is one of the more underreported stories, probably because no one actually cares about the Pelicans, but when your two best players are missing games and they both don't have agents, that's just a bad look. Now the Zion situation is what it is, but the Brandon Ingram one, he doesn't have a contract, doesn't have an agent, that just looks like bad business, looks like a bad look. Now Brandon Ingram signs with Clutch, and if he plays tomorrow or tonight whenever they play again, that's gonna look like a bad look, in my opinion. And I know when people seen Brandon Ingram signs with Clutch, you immediately think, oh, he's going to the Lakers or he's forcing his way out, and that might be the case. I don't know about the Lakers part, but he might be leaving. I also wouldn't rule it past this making it more likely he stays. I don't know. David Griffin and Clutch do have a kind of solid relationship, despite what it may seem like, right? But I do think whatever the case is, things are being accelerated by him signing with Clutch. So I want to talk about my ideal spots for Brandon Ingram to land. And I've been making these videos for 2 years at this point. Why not make another one? Now, first of all, where do I want Brandon Ingram to go? Like, what type of situation do I want him to go to? Do I want him to go to a championship-ready team? I don't know how many of those are out there that would want to get BI. Only one I could think of is the Golden State Warriors, and you guys might disagree with that one, but we know Steve Kerr, not a fan of Brandon Ingram. And I'm also not sure he's the exact, plug and play type on a championship team. On the right one, he could be, right? But I don't think he fits everywhere seamlessly. I think he can make it work because he's an extremely talented basketball player, but I don't think he's a just drop him anywhere and he's gonna flourish type of player. But I also don't want him going to like a bottom feeder team where I don't want him going to Detroit. I don't want him going to Washington. No disrespect to Detroit. Seems like they're turning it around a little bit. I would just want Brandon Ingram in a situation with a little bit more structure than some of the worst teams in the NBA. So a middling team, right, that has potential, that has a solidified face of franchise level star, which is hard to find for a middling team because you're usually middling because you don't have that guy. But the team I've been wanting him to go to for a couple years at this point, before they even made a run last year, is the Indiana Pacers. And I really wanted this to happen after watching Brandon Ingram and Tyrese Halliburton in the FIBA run, where they were coming off the bench together and it seemed like they had real chemistry on the court. So I became fascinated with that idea. Then the Pacers acquired Pascal Siakam. Then I'm like, okay, now they wouldn't want Brandon Ingram. But that's before when it seemed like Tyrese Halliburton was gonna be this like top 5 player in the NBA type of player. That sounds crazy, but he was playing like it at one point. But now that it seems like Tyrese Halliburton is gonna be a very good player, all-star, probably all-NBA level player, but not, that guy, not one of the most dominant players in the NBA, which it seemed like he might be, during the play-in tournament, or not playing the in-season tournament last year, right? So it becomes clear that they might need a little bit more shot creation on their team, which is why I feel like Brandon Ingram would be a nice fit. But then you look at the contracts on their team and there's not really a way to make a deal work without giving up Miles Turner. And if I'm Indiana, I'm not doing that. So I don't really see a way he gets to Indiana without it being a 3-team deal. Maybe this summer if Brandon Ingram happens to stay with the Pelicans and they could work out a sign and trade and Andrew Nembhard goes from his rookie deal to $18 million next year, maybe that could be something. So sorry to waste your time with the Pacers, but I really think that would be the best fit for BI. I just don't see how it's gonna happen this year. But if I'm the Pacers, depending on how Nembhard finishes this year, he just came back. If he doesn't look like, the player we thought he was gonna be during the playoff run, then I could see packaging him in a deal for BI, especially with the way Matherin's playing. Just throwing that team out there, something I would really like for both sides here. But besides Indiana, there's only one team I feel like should trade for Brandon Ingram. Now there's other teams where, okay, that makes sense, they could work it out. But this team I feel like should trade for Brandon Ingram. And before this year, I would have said the Kings, right? Before they got DeMar, I would have said the Kings are one of those teams, but they got DeMar. But the other team is the San Antonio Spurs. First of all, to me, he's a perfect fit in between Wemby and Chris Paul. Harrison Barnes, Devin Vassell, that as a starting 5 is ridiculous in my opinion. But for the Spurs, what would you realistically have to give up to go get Brandon Ingram? To me, it's Keldon Johnson. You have to throw in like Zach Collins to make the money work, and then a 1st round pick, maybe a 1st and a couple seconds. I think the market for Brandon Ingram is actually that low. Just realistically, real quick, Pelicans fans, what do you think you're getting for Brandon Ingram at this point? Now, if you would have said this summer, you would have convinced yourself we're going to get a haul for him. A couple years ago, we're going to get a haul for him. At this point, right now, the whole world knows you probably don't want to pay this guy. Your team's not competing. You're probably actively tanking. What do you think you're getting for BI right now? So first, let me explain why I think Brandon Ingram is a great fit in San Antonio. Then I'll get into why the Pelicans might do it. I'm not saying it's a great deal for the Pelicans, but I'll get into why they might actually do it. Now, why BI fits in San Antonio. One, great pick and roll partner for Victor Wembanyama. Brandon Ingram, in my opinion, is probably the most underrated passer in the NBA. And Brandon Ingram is also better in the pick and roll with guys that are a little bit more deliberate, which is kind of a plus and a minus. You know, Wemby doesn't necessarily roll hard to the basket every time, but he likes to float out there and, like, you know, pick and pop or the little short push shots, right? And to me, that's where Brandon Ingram flourishes. When I thought he was going to get traded to Utah in the past, I made a video explaining how him pick and roll partner with Larry Markin would be a lot similar to him with Trey Murphy. And, you know, similar thing with Victor Wembanyama. He's gonna pop and he's gonna shoot a lot of threes. Brandon Ingram is elite at that. And obviously that's gonna provide a lot of space for Brandon Ingram to get in his mid-range bag, which I think this Spurs team could actually use. Also, in a lineup with Wemby at the 5 and Harrison Barnes at the 4, Brandon Ingram is gonna have the actual space to get all the way to the rim. And lately, not really this year, but you can't really account for this year. I don't know what's going. The Pelicans aren't a real team. But Brandon Ingram has become one of the best finishers at the rim. And right now, this team doesn't really have anyone that puts significant pressure on the rim. And if they do, they aren't players that can pass once they get there. So to me, Brandon Ingram is a great fit with Wembanyama. He's actually like the perfect type of player I want next to Wemby right now. And we'll see how that evolves going forward. We'll see how Wemby evolves going forward and what he actually needs around him. But that's also why Brandon Ingram makes a lot of sense to me. If I'm the Spurs, I get BI, I give him a 3-year deal, assuming he would agree on it. But in 3 years, we can reassess. Brandon Ingram will only be 30 years old. He will be in line for his last big deal, hypothetically, in theory, right? 30 years old, you're supposed to be still in your prime. So Brandon Ingram would be in line to go get another max deal if he proves he's worth it with the Spurs. And Victor Wembanyama in 3 years is only gonna be 23 years old. So if it doesn't work, who really cares? You gave up Keldon Johnson, you gave up a first-round pick in the future, and maybe a couple seconds, and you got a player that is an all-star level player that I feel like fits very well with Victor Wembanyama. And if it doesn't work, then who cares? He's 23 years old. We still have his whole career in front of him, and we can move on and figure out what exactly does work. But if I'm Brandon Ingram, this is a place where I can shine and show my worth. I'll take a 3-year, you know, $35 million a year type of deal because I think he's able to get that. I just don't think he can get the $50 million. But if I'm the Spurs, yeah, I'll give Brandon Ingram 3 years, $100 million. I'll do that. Or 3 years, 105, whatever it might be. If we're going $50 million, I'm just not sure anybody's giving that to BI. But on the Pelican side, it is Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins in the first-round pick, and I'll keep saying 2 seconds. So no, I'm not sitting up here saying, man, this is such a steal for the Pelicans to get Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins in the first-round pick. Not at all. The Pelicans misplayed this a while ago. They could have been made this decision. They waited and waited. Now Brandon Ingram has little to no real value on the market. But for a second, let's try to rationalize why this deal would make sense for the Pelicans. Again, on the front end, I'm not saying this is some great deal. But first of all, you get Zach Collins, who is not an amazing player. Backup big, making $16 million is not what you want, but you don't want him for the player, you want him for the contract. He's an expiring deal next year, and as you'll see probably this trade deadline, that expiring deals are extremely important for going out there and getting a player you actually want on your team. You're probably going to see this with the Warriors and DeAnthony Melton. Just $12 million that you're not using that you could incorporate in a deal to go get a player you really want. So you're going to have that in Zach Collins, $16 million for next year. And also, you have a stretch 5 as a backup big that this team is desperately needed. I don't know what this team's going to look like next year, but he does provide that at least, right, in theory. But the real appeal of Zach Collins is the $16 million in expiring money for next trade deadline. Then you'd be getting Keldon Johnson, who's only 25 years old. A couple years ago was putting up 22 points per game. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he's on a 3-year deal. You can rehab his value, and his deal goes down. So this year he's making $19 million. The next 2 years he's gonna be making 17.5. So if he comes into a situation with no Brandon Ingram, we know Zion is gonna miss a bunch of time, if not be traded at this point, who knows? Maybe CJ is gone as well. He's gonna be coming into a situation where he can actually rehab his value. He's not gonna be so good that you're gonna win a bunch of games, but he could put up numbers, rehab his value, and then you have him on 2 more years at $17.5 million. Again, another real valuable asset. And the Pelicans, in my mind, aren't trying to acquire players to win right now. They're trying to set themselves up for a future move. And getting Keldon Johnson at $17.5 million and an expiring deal in $16 million is Zach Collins and a first-round pick puts you in position to make another move going forward. And it's hard to exactly figure out what the Pelicans are doing going forward. I don't imagine a world where, you know, Jordan Hawkins or a Herb Jones or a Misi would be traded. I don't imagine that would be the case, but those guys are real assets, right? But they make little to no money. So now let's just say you wanted to make a move and you have Zach Collins making, actually he's making $18 million next year. You pair that with $4 or $5 million for Hawkins, and now you could actually go get that real player you might want to get. Again, I don't know who that is. I'm just speaking hypothetically here. I don't think the Pelicans are making win now moves, but we kind of just seen this last summer where Larry Nance was the Zach Collins in this equation, where you package his money, his salary with a Dyson Daniels, and you go get a DeJounte Murray. And I'm sure the Hawks were excited to get Larry Nance, but they made that deal because they seen the asset in Dyson Daniels, but you needed the salary to make that happen. Right now, the Pelicans don't have any real salary to do a trade like that. They have B.I., Zion, and CJ all making over $30 million. They have DeJounte making $29 million. Trey Murphy's gonna be making in the 20s next year when his deal kicks in. The only real middling salary they have is Herb Jones at $13 million, and you're probably not trading Herb Jones. So in the simplest way to put it, after I just did all that talking, the reason you'd be doing this deal is the first-round pick and also the flexibility that having these middling contracts gives you to go make another move in the future when you feel more solidified on the direction you want to go in, because right now we have no idea what that direction is for the Pelicans. So that is why this deal would make some type of sense to me for the Pelicans. I just think whatever you think you're getting for Brandon Ingram, it's going to be more like this than we're getting this young up-and-coming star for Brandon Ingram. I just don't see that happening. Maybe the Pelicans are able to get like a Blake Wesley or a Malachi Branham if they really believe in that. I don't think so. Hands on the table, maybe, I don't know. Don't think that's realistic, but that's why I think it makes a little bit of sense for the Pelicans to make a move like this. Again, I'm not telling you guys that it's a great move. I'm just saying I could see why it would make sense, but I'm really making this video for the Spurs side of it. And I think getting Brandon Ingram would make a ton of sense for the Spurs, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think B.I. is going to be traded? Do you think he's going to the Lakers because he signed with Clutch? Do you think the Pelicans should trade him? Let me know all that down in the comments below. Please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out. Peace.